I've been around long enough to know what it looks like when a country is standing at the edge of something it doesn't fully understand yet. And I want to talk to you tonight honestly and plainly, because I think that's exactly where we are right now. Size. Most people woke up this Sunday morning, March 22nd, thinking about their families, their gas bills, maybe the basketball tournament. And I don't blame them. But while they were sleeping, the President of the United States posted a message on social media from his home in Florida, surprised, giving the nation of Iran 48 hours to fully reopen the Strait of Hormuz or face the obliteration of their power plants, starting with the biggest one first. Those were his words. Now look, and I've sat in that chair. I've had to make decisions about military force that kept me up at night and that I carry with me to this day. So I don't say this lightly. What happened last night is not just another headline. It is not just another post. This is a sitting president in the middle of an unauthorized war, now in its fourth week, drawing a red line on social media that could affect 90 million Iranian civilians, send oil past $150 a barrel, and pull this entire region into a war none of us can control. And here is what concerns me most. The question everyone should be asking is not whether Iran opens that strait. The question is what happens to us, to our institutions, to our economy, to working families already paying $1 more per gallon than they were a month ago, to our standing in the world, to the Constitution itself. Because let me tell you something. When a democracy goes to war, how it goes to war matters just as much as why. And right now, both of those things are in serious trouble. To understand why this ultimatum is so dangerous, you have to understand how we got here, because this did not come out of nowhere, even though it sure felt like it did. Back on February 6th, Iran and the United States were sitting at a table in Geneva, indirect negotiations mediated by Oman, trying to work out a nuclear deal. Diplomacy, the kind of slow, unglamorous work that doesn't make great television but keeps people alive. I know, I did that work for 8 years. Then on February 28th, while those talks were still ongoing, the United States and Israel launched what they called Operation Epic Fury, nearly 900 strikes in 12 hours. Cities across Iran, military sites, air defenses, infrastructure. Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei was killed. His son took over. And just like that, we went from diplomacy to the most significant American military operation in the Middle East since the Iraq War. And here is what they don't tell you. Congress never voted on this. The House tried to pass a war powers resolution on March 4th. It failed. The Senate tried again as recently as March 18th. Republicans blocked it. So we are now in the fourth week of a war that the American people's representatives have never authorized. By March 4th, Iran had closed the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway that carries a fifth of the world's oil supply. Gas prices went from $2.94 to $3.93 a gallon. Brent crude broke $105. Over 5,300 people have been killed, including more than 500 civilians. Iranian missiles struck southern Israel just yesterday near Dimona, injuring over 100 people, including a 10-year-old boy. And in the middle of all of this, just one day before the ultimatum, the president said we were, and I quote, winding down the war. 24 hours later, he's threatening to obliterate power plants. We've got to reckon with that, because the path that brought us here was not inevitable. It was chosen. And the choices that come next will define us. Now, let's slow down and actually look at what the president wrote, because words matter, especially when they come with a countdown to destruction. He said, posted at 23:44 GMT Saturday night, if Iran doesn't fully open without threat the Strait of Hormuz within 48 hours from this exact point in time, the United States of America will hit and obliterate their various power plants, starting with the biggest one first. That puts the deadline around Monday night. That language raises more questions than it answers. What does fully open without threat mean in operational terms? There are mines in that water. There are destroyed coastal facilities. The IRGC still has positioning along the strait. Admiral Brad Cooper at Central Command said just hours earlier that Iran's ability to target vessels had been degraded, suggesting the military already considers progress made. So is this ultimatum based on the actual battlefield picture, or is it something else entirely? And then there is what he is threatening: power plants. Civilian power infrastructure serving 90 million people, hospitals, water treatment, homes with children in them. Under the Geneva Conventions, targeting objects indispensable to the survival of civilian populations raises profound legal questions. This is not a military installation. This is the light switch for an entire nation. Iran's response was immediate. Their army stated they would target all energy and desalination infrastructure belonging to the United States and its allies in the region. That means the Gulf states. That means facilities where American service members are stationed right now. And this is where things start to get dangerous because there is a real gap between what our military commanders say they have already accomplished and what this ultimatum demands. When the people running the war and the person commanding it are not on the same page, that is not strength. That is confusion. And confusion in moments like this gets people killed. Now I want to be careful here because I respect the office of the presidency. I lived in that house, I carried that weight, and I know that every president faces moments where the options are bad and worse. I get that, but I also know this. The way you make the decision matters almost as much as the decision itself. And what I saw last night was not the deliberative process that the gravity of this moment demands. When I ordered strikes on Iraq in 1998, Operation Desert Fox, I consulted with my national security team. I briefed congressional leaders. I addressed the nation from the Oval Office. When we engaged in Kosovo, we built a coalition first. Were those decisions controversial? Absolutely. Did people disagree with me? You bet they did. But there was a process. There was accountability. The American people knew who was making the call and why. Here is the honest truth. Issuing a 48-hour ultimatum on social media from your weekend residence in Florida, one day after saying the war is winding down, without a press conference, without a National Security Council briefing to Congress, without even a phone call to allied leaders who depend on that strait for 90% of their energy, that is not how a commander-in-chief should operate. It just isn't. And let's talk about the whiplash. Friday. We're getting very close to meeting our objectives. Saturday night, we will obliterate your power grid. What changed in 24 hours? What intelligence shifted? Or did nothing change at all? And this is about something other than strategy. When I was president, even when I disagreed with Congress, and Lord knows I did, I understood that the system only works when both branches stay in the conversation. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 exists for exactly this kind of moment. And Senate Republicans have blocked every single attempt to invoke it, every single one. That should concern every American, regardless of party, because the next president who governs without guardrails might not be the one you voted for. Now, I want to widen the lens here because this is not just about Iran. This is about what is happening to the machinery of American democracy itself. Think about what just happened. A decision that could plunge 90 million people into darkness, that could trigger retaliatory strikes across the Persian Gulf, that could send oil prices to levels we have not seen since the worst days of the 1970s. That decision was announced on a social media platform, not from the Situation Room, not after a National Security Council meeting with congressional leaders present, not in coordination with our allies on Truth Social on a Saturday night. Now, look. I'm not a man who gets rattled easily, but that should rattle every American who cares about how this country governs itself. Because when you make war and peace decisions on social media, you are not just skipping a step. You are telling the world that the institutions we built over 250 years, the checks, the balances, the consultations, don't matter anymore. And our allies are watching. Japan imports nearly 90% of its oil through that strait. South Korea the same. The UK, France, Germany, and Italy issued a joint statement condemning the Hormuz closure. That should have been the foundation for collective action for a real coalition. Instead, they learned about the ultimatum the same way you and I did, scrolling through their phones. When I worked with NATO during Kosovo, we didn't agree on everything. But we picked up the phone, we sat in rooms together, we built something, and because we did, that coalition held. Now the president has called allied leaders cowards. He has made unilateral threats that affect their economies, their security, their people, without so much as a heads up. And here is what that does. It tells Russia, it tells China, it tells North Korea that American decision-making is unpredictable, not in a strategic way, in a destabilizing way. And when adversaries stop being able to predict how we will behave, the risk of miscalculation, the kind that starts wider wars, goes through the roof. Now, here is where I want to be honest with you in a way that might make some people uncomfortable. Whenever I see a decision that doesn't make strategic sense, I have learned to ask a different question: who benefits? Before this war even started, I said publicly that Benjamin Netanyahu had long wanted a confrontation with Iran, because as long as there is a war, there is a reason to stay in power. I said that, and I stand by it. That does not mean Israel does not face real threats. It does. Those missiles hitting near Dimona yesterday were real. That 10-year-old boy in the hospital is real. But the question of whether this particular war, launched this particular way, at this particular time, serves the security of the Israeli people or the political survival of their prime minister, that is a question worth asking. And here at home, hawks in the administration are talking about this as a generational opportunity. The president himself is trapped. He said the war was winding down. Now he has issued an ultimatum that demands escalation. How do you walk that back without looking weak? You can't. And that is the problem with ultimatums made for cameras instead of strategy rooms. But here is who is really paying the price. And it is not the people making these decisions. It is the family in Ohio paying $1 more per gallon to get to work. It is the small business owner watching shipping costs spike. That gas price increase is a regressive tax. It does not hit everyone equally. It hits the people at the bottom the hardest, the very people who were promised economic relief. And we are already seeing it ripple. Supply chain disruptions, inflation fears creeping back, markets getting jittery. The people at the top ride it out. The people at the bottom get crushed. The political calculus of appearing tough on Iran is being prioritized over the material well-being of American families. And that is not strength. That is a choice. And it is the wrong one. So let's talk about what actually happens when that clock runs out. The deadline expires roughly Monday night, March 23rd, around 23:44 GMT. As I see it, there are 3 scenarios. Scenario A, and I think this is the most likely, Iran partially complies. They allow some commercial shipping through, maybe under certain conditions, but they do not fully reopen unconditionally. The administration declares a partial victory, quietly extends the timeline, and hopes the news cycle moves on. That might buy a few days. But it solves nothing structurally. The mines are still there. The IRGC is still positioned. And the underlying conflict, an unauthorized war with no stated endgame, continues to burn. Scenario B, Iran does not comply and the president follows through. American strikes hit power plants across Iran. 90 million people lose electricity, hospitals go dark, water treatment shuts down, and Iran retaliates, not just against Israel, but against energy and desalination infrastructure across the Gulf. The UAE, Kuwait, Saudi facilities, all potentially in the crosshairs. Oil prices do not just spike. They could blow past $150 a barrel. And now you are not looking at a contained conflict. You are looking at a regional conflagration with no off-ramp, no coalition, and no congressional authorization. Scenario C, the deadline passes and nothing happens. The United States does not strike. And in that case, American credibility, the thing that underwrites every alliance, every deterrent, every negotiation we conduct around the world, takes a devastating hit. Every adversary takes note. Every ally wonders whether our word means anything. Here's the honest truth. All 3 scenarios leave the United States worse off than before that post was written. And that is because the ultimatum was designed as a political instrument, not a strategic one. When you put yourself in a box with a deadline you made up on social media, every door out looks like a defeat. And what I am most afraid of, what keeps someone like me up at night, is the humanitarian cost of Scenario B and the strategic vacuum of Scenario C happening simultaneously. Because in war, things do not stay in neat categories. They spiral. So where does that leave us? I will tell you where I think it leaves us. At a moment of decision that belongs not to one man, but to all of us. I am calling on every American, regardless of party, to demand that their elected representatives do their constitutional duty, vote on a war authorization, hold public hearings, force this administration to articulate clear objectives, a legal framework, and an exit strategy. That is not partisanship. That is the republic working the way it was designed to work. In 1991, before the Gulf War, the Senate voted 52-47 to authorize the use of force. It was close. It was contentious. Senators stood up and made their case for and against. And because they did, when American troops went into battle, they went with the full weight of democratic legitimacy behind them. That is how a democracy goes to war, not with a social media post at midnight. We have got to remember what is at stake in human terms. Over 5,300 people are dead in Iran, many of them civilians who had no part in any of this. Over 100 Israelis were wounded just this weekend. American service members are in harm's way right now in bases across the Gulf, under threat of retaliation they did not ask for. And families here at home are watching gas prices climb with no end in sight, wondering when any of this starts making their lives better instead of harder. Let me tell you something. I believe with everything I have that strength and restraint are not opposites. The strongest thing America can do right now is act through its institutions, with its allies, under the law, with clear goals and moral authority. That is not weakness. That is the kind of strength the world actually respects, because it is the kind that lasts. The measure of a great nation is not what it can destroy, it is what it can build and what it refuses to break. And right now, we are breaking things. Some overseas, yes, but also some things inside our own democracy that are going to be very, very hard to put back together. But I still believe we can get this right. I have seen this country correct course before, sometimes at the last possible moment. And I believe in the fundamental decency and common sense of the American people. So pay attention, speak up, hold your representatives accountable, because this is still America and the story is not over yet.